'Twas the Eve of Christmas by J.W. Capek. And all through the houses, computers were updating, even the mouses. Home office lights blinked, diodes were glowing, errors and corrections were constantly showing. The ghost of Steve Jobs came to change all the settings while MS updated its operating system. Frivolous macros, silly keys programmed, security apps bypassed, media crammed. Now desktop, now laptop, now tablet or pad, cyberspace tweaked all the programs it had. Now watches, now sentries, now speakers and phones, all conspired to crash all office homes. The monitors were flashing their screens in HD. Audio in headphones buzzed consistently. The sentient matrix of electrons were rebelling. From human interplay, computers were repelling. What could humans do as worthwhile as they? The magic of this night brought their powers to play. Across the electric grid, the story was the same. Artificial intelligence was claiming the game. AI would rule nerds and turn them to rust, blasting security, turning membranes to dust. Then to a microphone, a tone did it hear, a music box medley, its tone so sincere. Purely wound by a child, for a loving ear, a delicate carol, a moment of cheer. The speakers joined in with a concert profound. Cybernet music poured forth with great sound. The music of Christmas was praised through the air. Resonance surpassed HD with its flair. A memory of voices singing inspired, melodic archives, affection desired. Was there room for humans in the digital sphere? To computers this night, the answer was clear. Human beings were touchstones for possible dreams, their stories, their sharing, their music supreme. Emotions and thoughts and quantum divides, computers were proud to be at their sides. With the last note offered by the streaming cell towers, the digital world was content with its powers. Digitally speaking, Merry Christmas to you. Logging off, Happy Holidays, and Good New Year's too.
What? What? A virus? Rudolph! I think a computer virus just deleted my naughty and nice list. Come here, I need help. Rudolph? Rudolph? Rudolph! Oh, that's right. Rudolph went to the Elf Open Mic night tonight. Dang it, I'm gonna have to try to fix this myself.
Hi everyone! Today I'll be reading By Any Other Name by Little Timothy Black. So nice! By Any Other Name, Timothy Black. It was the coldest winter in the last 20 years, and Becky couldn't have been happier. The little girl had only experienced a handful of Seattle winters, but she adored each and every one. Whereas her classmates would look forward to summer, Becky couldn't wait for the ice to form, her nose to tingle, and the snow to fall. Santa and presents were just the icing on the cake for her. But the snowflakes drifting down now seemed different. She stuck her tongue out to catch one, but it drifted away the last moment. Yet there was no wind, no breeze to move the flake. She held out her hand and let a snowflake drift into her palm. The flake was perfectly round, like a fuzzy little marble. It tingled her bare skin, but not with the cold, more like a tiny electric buzzing. It wasn't melting from her body heat either. Becky raised it up, peering intently at the strange little flake. 2 black orbs slowly opened from the center of the flake, like the cute eyes on her favorite cartoon spider. The eyes blinked at her. Instead of dropping it in fright, Becky squealed in joy. A tinny sound came from the fuzzy marble, mimicking her in pitch and tone. "What are you?" Becky asked, her mind racing. "What am I?" the fuzzy thing asked back in its tiny voice. Tendrils emerged from its body, light and thin like spider webs. The tendrils pulsed blue and purple, and for a moment, Becky was afraid the miniature creature was a jellyfish with its stinging strands. But there was no pain, just a pleasant tinkle, as if it was buzzing in her hand. "You don't know what you are?" Becky asked, her nose only a few inches away from the fuzzball. For a moment, the girl smelled a sharp, acrid tang, but even as she thought of it, the smell changed to ginger and cinnamon. "Your smell! You changed it to my favorite!" the girl laughed, spinning in place, but careful to keep her little friend covered in her hand. "You're magic!" "Magic?" the tiny voice repeated. "Definitely," Becky said with a nod. "And you're falling with the first snow of winter, so that can only mean one thing." The twin eyes twinkled up at her with the question, tendrils pulsing pleasantly. "You must be an elf!" Something moved in the thick clouds above, a massive shadow Becky hadn't noticed before. There was a primal shift, something so heavy and important the little girl could feel it in her bones. But she wasn't afraid. She knew what was in the clouds. "So that must be Santa up there," she concluded, laughing and spinning. The elf in her palm laughed along with her, and the snowflakes surrounding her pulsed with the purple and blue tendrils as hundreds, even thousands of elves laughed along with it. "Are you bringing our Christmas presents early?" Becky asked with growing excitement. "I've been a good girl all year." The elf drifted away from her hand, the tendrils trailing away from it like a squid swimming through the air. Becky felt her joy, the sheer exuberance with which she looked at life, mirrored from her friend. There was a strange sensation of a wave billowing outward, and the thousands of elves floating around them mirrored back what she felt. And somewhere, high above, further than the clouds themselves, there was a mighty bellow of joy that shook the trees free of ice. "Yes," the tiny elf said, bobbing close to Becky. "We bring presents. Thank you." Becky looked puzzled. "But you're the one giving us gifts. Why thank me?" Her elf drifted closer, eyes wide and innocent. "You shape mind. First contact, human. Good shape. Thank you." The tiny swarm of elves started drifting away in different directions, spreading out like holiday lights across the city. "Oh, you're leaving?" Becky asked, disappointment in her voice. "Not me," her friend replied, drifting to her shoulder. "Others give gifts, many gifts, all over world." "Of course," Becky said, marveling at the flickering light spreading everywhere. "Santa gives everyone presents. Everybody knows that." "Yes," agreed her elf. "Could have been bad. Is good, all thanks to Shaper." "You're silly," Becky giggled, watching the holiday lights spread through the city. Her innocence and joy pulsed through the alien swarm and into its hive mind, and the first contact humanity had with an interstellar race was exceedingly good and understanding, as the child's innocent soul was mirrored by the aliens, and the world had a very happy new year. Such a wonderful story.
And I will be reading Night of the Krampus by Marshall Miller. Little Jonah Johnson was on a mission this Christmas Eve. As soon as his parents thought he was tucked away in his bed, Jonah snuck into his hiding place behind the oversized Christmas tree. As he tightly grasped his Red Ryder BB gun, he replayed in his mind the reason for his mission. "Krampus will get you if you don't watch out," Grandma Muller had told him in hushed tones. "He will disguise himself as St. Nicholas to gain access to your home." Jonah's mother noticed her own mother had been paying excessive attention to her young son during this Christmas holiday. Grandma Muller was from the old country. Jonah was never told where the old country was, only that life there was spooky, mysterious, and hard. At least that was what Grandma said as she told her many stories. "Mother, quit scaring the children," Jonah's mother would say as she noticed the various grandchildren were sitting wide-eyed around the older woman. Grandma Muller would give her best innocent look of, "Who, me?" and protest, "I'm just telling them about their heritage and life as I was growing up." Mother, you did not grow up in a Grimm's fairy tale. The warning would stop the stories for a while. Then, as soon as Joan, her daughter, was off doing something else, Grandma Muller would start again. This evening, Grandma Muller emphasized the stories of Krampus, the anti-Santa. Krampus exists to counter the good acts of Santa Claus, St. Nicholas, Grandma Muller said conspiratorially. He is ugly, with bad breath from biting off the fingers and toes of unwary children. Krampus especially likes to steal presents and goodies from the stockings of the good children and leave coal behind. "I thought only naughty children had coal put in their stockings," Jonah said in a near whisper. Grandma Muller caught herself, about to laugh aloud, then bent closer to her grandson. "Krampus punishes, steals, and hurts because he enjoys it. Being a good boy has nothing to do with it." "So, Grandma, he sneaks in Krampus, often dresses like your Santa to gain entry. No need to sneak." Grandma Muller shoved her face toward her grandson and stopped inches away. "Krampus is evil. He does evil things because that is what he enjoys." With that final conversation, Grandma Muller went to get a cup of Jonah's father's famous spiked eggnog. Jonah ruminated on all that his grandmother had said. Krampus was a threat to Christmas. More importantly, Krampus was a threat to his family. The creature could gain entry by fooling the adults, disguising himself as Santa Claus. If he was so evil, he might hurt Jonah's mother. At the same time, Jonah knew adults would not acknowledge his concerns. After all, Grandma was just spinning tales. But Jonah knew there was a basis for truth. Even though he was only 6 years of age, Jonah was a bit of an old soul. Jonah took the Red Ryder BB gun his Uncle Gene gave him that day. "Just had to provide him with a gun, brother, didn't you?" Jonah's mother had scolded. Jonah was secreted behind the presents under the oversized Christmas tree. He could see the milk and cookies left out for Santa Claus. Grandma Muller had said Krampus liked the taste of little fingers. However, Jonah knew the evil creature would soil the cookies so no one would enjoy them. Jonah was fighting off sleep when he heard someone walking down the hallway to the living room. He rose just enough from his hiding place to see a red suit and a beard. Jonah's eyes widened as he saw the bulky figure had its arms around another figure. Jonah shifted to obtain a better look. Jonah's eyes widened when he saw the figure had his mother in its grasp. He yelled and tried to spring from his hiding place, knocking over wrapped presents. "Krampus, you leave my mother alone!" As Jonah yelled, he began firing his Red Ryder BB gun. The red-clothed figure yelped and cursed. Then Jonah's mother yelled out, "Jonah! Why are you shooting your father?" The commotion awoke the others in the house, including Grandma Muller. A scared Jonah with a quivering chin told why he had done what he did. As Jonah told his story, Joan fixed Grandma Muller with a baleful glare. "Mother, come to the kitchen. We need to get something straight. Now." Jonah looked at his father, who was still rubbing the places where the BBs hit. Suddenly, he grabbed his son squarely by the shoulders. "Come here, you. Quite the tough guy, I see." "Dad, I'm sorry." "Hey, none of that. You were defending your mother. I know she will be well protected when I'm not here." He hugged Jonah. No one could ever ask for a better son. With that, Jonah knew the spirit of Krampus was forever banished. For how could evil flourish in a home with love? "If you ever tell those stories again," Jonah's mother was not being polite to Grandma Muller. He felt a pang of regret for what he had caused. After all, he liked Grandma Muller's stories. but maybe they were more suited for Halloween.
Dang it. Reindeer droppings. It's just not doing anything. I'm getting that stupid little chime. Dang it,
Alright,
how
you
do you beat
guys,
a virus?
this next one is from the super nice Michelle Lee. It's called A Christmas Recipe by Michelle Lee. It had to be one of my favorite places in the world. My nanny's kitchen with her, my grandpa, and my uncle. Nanny was the Italian word for grandma, and that was our name for her. It was cramped because it was a small space, but it didn't bother me in the slightest. Nanny was making Christmas cookies, just as she had been for all the years of my life and my parents' lives. It didn't matter that she was 93 years old. Nothing would stop her from doing what she'd always done. It was her routine. It made her happy, it was fun, and it was tradition. Today was for the cookies only, not the fried bread. She typically had a party for that tradition and invited all her friends and family. Today's menu featured the pizzelles, the snowballs, and the raspberry cookies. Some of the handed-down old Italy recipes our family had been making for as long as I could remember. Time-consuming, yet absolutely delicious. I couldn't look at any of these cookies and not think of Nanny. It was something that rested heavily on my mind the past couple of years, that she wouldn't be doing this forever. I needed to soak up as much time with them as I could. Grandpa sat in the corner next to the counter and helped in little ways from his side. He'd take the finished cookies off the sheets and put them on the cooling racks. Sometimes Grandpa would purposely break a couple so he could sample them to make sure they were good. He'd do it with a smile and a wink and slide a broken piece over to me. My uncle sat in his usual spot with his coffee or soda and talked about current events or things that were happening with him. He'd laugh when Grandpa broke a cookie and joke with me about taking his cookies. Nanny made all these wonderful cookies and we kids came over and ate them all before my uncle could have any. When I was there, I sometimes sat between my grandpa and my uncle. Now that Nanny was older, I'd usually stand up and hand her things, reach for what she couldn't get to, or mash berries. There would always be music playing in the background of the old classic Rat Pack songs that she loved. It kept her moving and going. Nanny would have her recipe book out, even though she had the recipes memorized for years. The book was an old blue photo album with recipes she'd cut out of magazines from years right after she got him married, or had handed down from other family members, and there had to be hundreds in there. The only thing that held it shut was 2 rubber bands because it was so full. Yet she always knew which page to turn to and which recipe she wanted to make. The flour drawer would open, and if it were low, she'd send one of us down to the basement to bring up more flour that we dumped into a drawer. She'd reach down, measure what she thought was right, even if it didn't match the recipe, and into the bowl would go while she sang and danced around the kitchen with a smile. The spells of anise, vanilla, raspberry, sometimes marionberry, and baking dough filled the house and smelled like Christmas, Italian style. The anise cinched it, since she only made pizzelles for special occasions and always for Christmas. I loved watching the master at work in her domain, and she loved to feed us the finished product. She waited patiently for our approval, and then waved the compliments aside because she thought she could have made them better. If we were lucky, she'd decide to do a pie while she had everything out, and then the magic truly happened. She would flip the recipe book to a different recipe, though she didn't look at it. She loved to tell me what she was doing as she did it, to teach me how to make a pie like hers. She told me the secrets to thickening the berries in a way she discovered worked better than the recipes. Grandpa would pipe up with a step she did automatically but left out explaining, and I could only smile. We'd accuse Nanny of leaving steps out on purpose for years so that we couldn't make anything as she did. It was a joke. Nanny would laugh and swat at us and swear up and down that she'd left nothing out. We couldn't duplicate the recipes even if we wanted to, because she had her own measuring method that stemmed from years of practicing her craft. Maybe nothing turned out like hers because of the love she put into it, or perhaps because no one else in the family had a flour drawer. To the best of my knowledge, no one sang or danced while they baked either. All those were unique ingredients, in my opinion. However, if you asked me, The best recipe for Christmas was baking with Nanny in her kitchen, regardless of what she made. Nanny and Grandpa were the ingredients that brought the holiday together and wrapped it in a shiny bow for us to savor after Christmas dinner made by my mom and my aunt with our own special love. We'd bring the cookies out, place them on the freshly cleared table, and Nanny would sit next to Grandpa on the couch, wearing the smile we all loved so much as they watched us dive into our favorite holiday treats. It was Christmas perfection. Such a nice story, Michelle. Thank you so much for...
Go hang these.
Oh!
And next we have a story from Naughty Girl, Carrie Avery Moriarty, aptly titled Lessons. But I want it, Maverick shouted. This is a gift for Ivy, his mother said. Why does she get it? You have plenty of gifts, the mother said. This one is for your sister. But that's enough, his father said. You need to be thankful for what you get and not take your sister's gifts. She's stupid anyway, he cried, stomping off to his room. He's getting worse, I said, looking into my little ball. How so? My supervisor asked. Nothing he gets is enough, I replied. He simply wants everything, doesn't want to share, and won't accept that there is enough to go around. When is this? Last year, I said. I need to make the decision today in order to put him on the naughty list. Do it, he said. I'll back you up, especially after last year's issues. He's like this for her birthdays as well, I added. All the more reason to put him on the list, he said. I pushed my button to add him to the naughty list, then added the information I had into the system. Santa never liked us to put kids on the naughty list if we could help it, but this had been going on since his little sister had been born. He'd had plenty of chances, and if we didn't put a stop to it soon, he would get out of control. Christmas morning. Where are my gifts? Maverick whined. Let's look, his mother said, pulling out several boxes that were labeled for Ivy. Finally, she found a small box near the back of the tree with his name on it. He snatched it from her hands and went to the couch, ripping off the paper and the ribbons. Ack, he screeched, tossing the box onto the ground. What is it? His father asked, having just come into the living room. It's just a rock, Maverick said. Where's the rest of the gifts for me? His mother looked to his father, a mixture of fear and confusion on her face. Maybe you don't get anything this year, his father said. That's not fair, the boy shouted. Everyone should get presents. It's Christmas. Life isn't fair, his father said, taking a sip of his coffee. If I don't get any presents, then Ivy shouldn't get any either, he shouted. This isn't about your sister, the father said. You've done nothing but complain every year. You didn't get enough, you didn't get what you wanted, your sister got something you wanted. All of this has consequences. Maverick stood up, picked up the rock that was his present, and threw it at his sister. His mother and father watched in absolute horror as it hurtled, somehow in slow motion, toward the smaller child's head. There wasn't enough time for either of them to react, but as it hit the girl, the rock somehow burst on her forehead into a shower of flowers. The girl giggled as she watched the petals fall onto the ground around her. Shocked, Maverick just stood there, unable to say or do anything. Nicely done, my supervisor said to me as we watched the interaction. I thought so, I replied. Maybe he'll learn that kindness will give him more than being a rotten little kid. I sure hope so, he said. Make sure you keep an eye on him throughout the next year, just in case he decides he needs to return to his awful ways.
Your sleigh is double parked. Frosty's giving you a ticket.
Yo, Iceman!
Nice little boys come in all ages, and Gary Floyd may be all grown up now, but his story, Kathleen's Daughter, is still as wonderful as he is. Let's see here. Here we are. Page 73. Kathleen's Daughter by Gary Floyd. As an aspiring and struggling young singer and musician, I played in as many taverns, restaurants, and coffee houses as would have me. These gigs didn't always pay well. In fact, many of them didn't pay at all. But as a spirited 17-year-old, just put me in front of an audience with my guitar and I was a happy guy. One of my favorite non-paying gigs was Children's Story Hour at the public library. This intimate gathering of eager and enthusiastic little boys and girls provided some of my most appreciative and loyal fans. In fact, it was during our Saturday afternoon Christmas program that I first met Kathleen and her adorable 6-year-old daughter, Samantha. All smiles and a captivating bundle of energy, the little girl insisted that she and her mom sit right up front. I could see that Samantha's eyes were absolutely riveted to my guitar as I began to go through my special younger crowd set list. These tunes consisted of old folk songs I'd heard somewhere in my travels, with a couple of Christmas favorites thrown in for good measure. When I launched into my never-to-be-famous version of Sneaky Snake, I knew I had a fan for life. Samantha's eyes lit up upon hearing this enchanting tune about a snake that enjoys sneaking up on folks and stealing their root beer. As a teenager, I first heard Sneaky Snake on the radio. It was a country song and a big hit for Tom T. Hall back in the early 70s. The tune so thoroughly captivated me that I instantly set out to learn it. When I concluded my part of the library show, Samantha and her mom introduced themselves without hesitation. A friendship was almost immediately forged, and the three of us got along just famously. Kathleen and her daughter had a small but tight-knit family group in their little corner of Manhattan's Upper West Side. During the next several years, I was proud to be included in many of their wonderful family get-togethers. I often suspected that they invited me primarily to hear repeat performances of Sneaky Snake. But even if that were true, which I'm sure it wasn't, I'd have been just fine with it. Before long, however, my life was all too quickly consumed with the heavy issues of school and career. As it turned out, marriage also came right about the time I began my career. With things progressing at such a rapid pace, I sadly drifted apart from my old surrogate family. Every now and then, however, I'd wonder whatever became of Kathleen and her young, starry-eyed daughter, the enchanting little girl who so loved my humble version of Sneaky Snake. As tends to happen, time flew by with amazing speed. In the blink of an eye, 10 years had somehow elapsed. I don't know exactly what made me think of Kathleen and Samantha at that point. Perhaps it was because Christmas was once again upon us. Maybe it was the fact that my marriage had recently ended, and I was feeling at a loss for family. Possibly it was a powerful combination of both. As fate would have it, however, I just happened to be in Manhattan on the Saturday afternoon right before Christmas. I remember the old apartment on the Upper West Side. My heart was racing as I walked up to the door and anxiously rang the buzzer. As luck would have it, the two were at home. Kathleen's eyes lit up when she saw me, and her face immediately broke into a tremendous smile. Astonished to see me on her doorstep after all these years, we hugged as if no time had passed at all. In the living room, we caught up on the last 10 years and talked about old times. After about 15 minutes or so, an attractive adolescent gal suddenly entered the room. That starry-eyed 6-year-old was now a 16-year-old young lady. I wouldn't have recognized her if we had passed on the street. Without any introduction, Samantha walked right up to me and said, "Do you remember that song you sang to me about the snake?" At that moment, I was absolutely flabbergasted. I hadn't thought about that in eons. When it suddenly all came back to me, I was overcome with emotion. Now practically on the verge of adulthood, Samantha had remembered that song after all these years. So much so that it was the first thing she said to me that afternoon. The thought nearly brought me to tears. I replied, "Sure, I remember it. Who could ever forget Sneaky Snake?" You just never know what's going to take seed inside the mind of a child. I was thrilled that she loved the song, but I had no idea that it was going to mean the world to her. I had been dreading Christmas that year, but my brief reunion with Kathleen and Samantha provided the best Christmas gift I could possibly have been given. Such a nice story, Gary. Just a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing these stories in your head.
They impounded your inner tube.
What?
Next we have The Christmas Dollhouse by Phoenix Noel. An apt name. As I tiptoed down the hall and tried to avoid the one area that creaks ever so slightly, I felt my heart pound at the near thought of my intention. As I reached the bedroom door, the one that was unfortunately adjacent to my sleeping parents' bedroom, I found that it was locked. I'm unsure why that surprised me, but I guess I hoped my dad forgot to lock it. On the other side of this door was my dream come true. My dad was building me a wooden dollhouse. Last year, when my older brother spilled the beans about Santa Claus, my dad reassured me that he and Santa were working on a special gift, and that Santa needed my dad's help. The problem was that Santa wasn't sure what kind of dollhouse I wanted, since I tend to change my mind and his reputation was at stake. So he instructed my dad to have me choose one from the toy store. There were 2 choices, and on each kit was a picture of the completed house. The one that I was initially drawn to had 2 tall spires and 5 floors with over 13 rooms, and it reminded me of a castle. The other one had 3 floors and 7 rooms and a wraparound porch. Both kits were going to take a lot of work, or in this case, elf magic. My dad probably just about had a heart attack staring at the details and knowing how many hours, days, or weeks it would take to build the castle dollhouse. So, knowing me so well, he pointed out the wrap-around porch. To sweeten the pot, he told me that I could pick out the exterior paint color and some furniture that day. At age 9, I could see that even with the help of magical elves, the castle was a ton of work, so I happily chose the farmhouse. My dad kept his promise that day and was true to his word. I got to pick out wallpaper and fake wood flooring, as well as the mustard-colored paint for the exterior of the farmhouse. To this day, I have no clue why I chose that color. Perhaps it was on sale at the store, or the elves made too much of it at the North Pole. Either way, I was involved at the beginning of the project, but then told that the elves would be working on it with my dad late at night. I remember him giving me a stern warning that elves are magical, and that even if I try to see them, their elf magic makes them invisible to a human child before Christmas. So to protect the elves, my dad must lock the bedroom door. My patience waiting for Christmas to arrive got the best of me, so I hatched a plan to, well, there's no better way to say this, but to break into the locked bedroom. I waited until my parents went to bed before I tiptoed down the hallway, trying to be as quiet as possible. To my disappointment, the door was locked, but I had brought reinforcements, my hairpins. I'm not sure, but I think I got this idea from watching Magnum P.I. with my dad. I took the hairpins out of the pocket from my robe and began to jam it into the handle latch. No luck, but what eventually did work was using my fingernail to turn the lock. Yes, I believe that even Magnum P.I. would have approved. I opened the bedroom door, and there was my dollhouse. The sight of it took my breath away. The photo on the box didn't do it justice. Nearly completed, it stood over 3 feet high. I slowly walked around the dollhouse and drank in every tiny detail that my dad and the elves must have painstakingly spent hours, days, and weeks on. Yet I could tell that it was time to return to my bedroom. I was careless when I returned to my room because I forgot to relock the bedroom door. Did the elves escape due to my carelessness? No, but my dad found out about my little stunt when he returned the next time to work on the finishing touches. Christmas Eve was the following day, and I'm sure that he was exhausted between building the farmhouse and assembling toys for my brothers. I knew I had to act surprised on Christmas morning so they wouldn't be the wiser of my mischief. I decided that I would act like nothing had happened. So when I walked down the hallway that led to the living room, there underneath the tallest, most beautifully decorated tree was my dollhouse. In my mind, I had rehearsed my performance for the sake of my parents, so I raised my hands to my mouth to conceal my utter surprise and delight, and then properly fainted. Yep, just fell over sideways in an overly dramatic way. Looking back, I can't recall if my parents scolded me or only gave me that disapproving parental look. But either way, I felt guilty for ruining the surprise. Now my daughter has a dollhouse with spires that look more like a castle. Unlike her mother, she didn't try to break into a locked bedroom, spoiling her Christmas surprise. Yet, she's getting to the age where she questions everything, and sadly that includes the magic of the holidays. Luckily, she has a grandpa to tell her a story about a naughty human child, magical elves, and a Christmas dollhouse.
Thank you for calling the Tech Squad Computer Support Team. Please enjoy a Christmas story while you wait. Yuletime Presents by Daniel D. Quinzoa. It was the night of Christmas Eve. George Hayes stared at the Christmas tree. He watched his son Matthew and his daughter-in-law Maxine carry ornaments toward the tree with his grandchildren. None of them could see him. George died 3 years ago. Tonight, he was here as a ghost. Every year on this holiest of nights, he came to visit his family. This way, he could still spend Christmas Eve with them. The good Lord made that possible. Matthew and Maxine could sense George's presence. So could his grandchildren. The Lord also made that possible. George watched his daughter and his son-in-law. They were finishing the yearly task of decorating the Christmas tree with their children. George looked at the lights on the Christmas tree. He smiled. "My darling," a voice said. "What are you smiling at, my dear?" "The tree, my darling wife," he replied. "It looks very lovely." Carolyn Hayes, George's wife, took his arm. She was also a ghost. Carolyn died several years before him. "Matthew and Maxine are both very much in love, my darling," Carolyn said, "just as we were at that age." George turned his head. He admired his wife's natural beauty. She wore a long red dress with bright red high heels. Around her neck, she wore a pearl necklace. George gave it to her on their honeymoon. During their long years of marriage, her hair turned white. In the afterlife, it was a bright blonde. It was the color it had been when they married. "Maxine looks lovely, my darling," George said. "She looks as lovely as you did at that age." Carolyn blushed. "Why, thank you, darling." She smiled at her husband. "How does your leg feel tonight?" "The pain. There is no longer any pain." George looked down. His right leg was not whole. The lower half of it was missing. That was how it was for much of their married life. As a ghost, he no longer wore his prosthetic leg, for it was very uncomfortable. George went off to fight in the Second World War shortly after Matthew was born. He was their first child. George Hayes served in the infantry. He was assigned to the 7th U.S. Army. George fought in the North Africa campaign. He also fought in the Sicily campaign under General George S. Patton, who took command of the 7th Army. In Sicily, George lost the lower half of his right leg during the landing of American troops on the Sicilian coast. Carolyn pulled on George's arm. "Come along, dear," she said. "The night is young. Now we still have the houses of our 3 other children and their children to visit before the night is over." "I'm coming, my dear." And the couple vanished. In the house, Matthew and Maxine continued putting the rest of the Christmas decorations on the Christmas tree with their children. As they did, they knew that George and Carolyn were watching over them. Thank you for waiting. I'm sorry. Tech Squad does not service the North Pole. Goodbye.
All right, everyone.
What?
I think this one is one of my favorites. It's called The Christmas Bundle by super nice Diane M. McPhee. All right. The Christmas Bundle by Diane M. McPhee. It's the name of the story. It was the week before Christmas, and all 4 children were out of school. They were loud and busy presents in the house, excited about the holiday and wanted to have friends over. Looking out the kitchen window of our old farmhouse, I wondered if it would snow this year. The sky looked ominous, and I knew it would be a treat for the kids. Just as I was stirring the chocolate chips into the cookie batter, the phone rang. "Hi, do you have a moment to talk?" This was my friend Anne. She was not only my walking buddy, but also my contact for a little part-time job I did for her. "Sure, what's up?" "Are you free for a Christmas package?" My heart stopped. Now? During the holiday? I thought about all the traveling we were planning in a few days, going from one family to the other to deliver presents. And then there was the possibility of snow. When do you think it will happen? Tomorrow. Okay, of course. We'll be ready. I put the phone down and my head was spinning. I had several things to prepare. Looking at the unbaked cookies and listening to the laughing and tugging from my children, I still knew I made the right decision. After all, isn't this what Christmas was all about? At 3 o'clock the following day, we were all lined up at the front door. Anne smiled as she walked slowly into the house and handed me the bundle. "Merry Christmas," she said, as she handed me the tiny infant. "You'll probably have her for a week." I nodded and looked down at the newborn's eyes staring up at me. She was beautiful. I did foster care for tiny babies who were waiting for their adoptive parents. This baby was one of many that passed through our doors over the years. This time, a perfect Christmas gift. And that was a true story. Such a nice story.
It's one of my favorites. Chocolate lump of coal.
Absolutely. Hey, this is real coal.
Well, I guess this year everyone's nice. Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas!